we're talking about names and people who are recognized and people who aren't. I thought this morning, Miss Hamilton, before you came to the studio, was your name ever a drawback, you think, as an actress? Because it's such a usual name. I've known two Margaret Hamiltons in my life.
No, I don't think so. No? I don't, I don't think that a name, I know people change their names sometimes for numerical reasons, the numbers don't add up right. Or perhaps it's a very difficult name to pronounce, something like that. But in general, I don't think it really makes a great deal of difference. I always feel it's like the mousetrap business, if you do good work and people like you, then it really doesn't matter what you're called. They can manage it somehow.
do tell them with whom they confuse you, because I hadn't thought of that.
Oh, well, I have often been given credit for Dora Mirandi's work. And Dora and I look, when we get dressed up as characters, I don't think that we look a great deal alike. There's a similarity in the shape of our faces. We both have long faces and we both have big noses. But we don't, or otherwise I don't think we really look alike at all. But when we get our hair back, and the knot and the hat on the head and all, we do resemble each other very much and have played sisters a number of times. And I'm always, every once in a while, getting credit for Dora's work, as I was saying, in the movie The Man with the Golden Arm. I was working at NBC every day at the time in a radio serial called Doctor's Wife, and I would go up and down in the elevator, and people would say, "Oh, just loved your work in Golden Arm," and I'd say, "Thank you." And if I told you, say, don't press the thing and say, "When did you make it, and how did you like it, and what was it like to work with so-and-so?" I don't say anything about it because it is often embarrassing to them. But if we get in any kind of a conversation about it, I'd then eventually say, "Well, I'll tell you something. I think you're talking about Dora Mirandi, and thank you for the compliment." But I don't like to, if I can avoid it, because I think it's a little embarrassing to them. They feel that then I'm going to be, put out a little bit because they didn't recognize me, and I have no feeling like that at all. I think Dora Mirandi's a superb artist, and I would always be very flattered to be given credit for her work. But
you must be recognized a lot, though, living in New York City and being
active. I am, and I'll tell you, it's mainly, though, for The Witch, which just annoys me so. Of course, I really should get used to it now, and I should be grateful, I guess, being a character actress, that they remember me for anything. But that was not my very favorite piece of work, but the impact is still absolutely startling to me. And of course, it's only because of television. It would never have had this impact if it hadn't been for that. It's the thousands of people that see it. And then, in addition to that, one of the funniest things that happens to me inside is that I will think I look very nice, and I'm waltzing down the street, and you know how you glance at these, you may not, but most ladies glance in the store windows you go by and think, yeah, that looks pretty good. And then somebody comes up and says, "Oh, I'd know you anywhere. I just loved you as the Wizard of Oz and the Witch." And I think, well, what's the use of getting all fixed up and fussed up?
You live in that charming section, Gramercy Park, with the lovely playground right in the middle. Now, do children recognize you? They see this film on television now.
No, they really don't. I don't think the little ones do. Their mothers do, And some of the younger, I would say perhaps 6, 7, 8, sometimes do, but they're not expecting you, and they really don't. They don't see a startled look come over somebody's face, and you know how in sitting across the subway, people look up at the ceiling, and then they look at me, and then they look down the car, and then they look at me again, and then they look the other way, and then finally, then suddenly I can just see it, the light dawns, and they either smile at you or not, or come over. But children, I don't think, do. Mainly they don't, expect it, and they're not. Some once in a rare while they will. But that's mostly because someone has said, who's sitting over there,
Wicked Witch of the West.
Yeah.
Did you happen to see the Jack Parr spectacular of last spring, I think it was, and he had Judy Garland on?
No.
Well, he was interviewing her, and he asked, that's right, you were on a tour around the world. He kept trying to get you. And he asked her about Wizard of Oz, of course, and about the Munchkins. And she said, well, the Munchkins mostly were drunk. Does she remember? Is that what you recall?
I think she's sort of kidding, because she was such a little girl and such a darling, and I think, she was 16, I believe, when we started it. And I don't know, I'm probably very naive because today, heaven knows, I'm sure 16-year-olds know a lot more than I ever will or have forgotten more than I'll ever know. But at that time, I don't know, perhaps they were, I don't remember that at all. I think she was probably teasing.
She said wanted after for a date.
Well, that's
Constantly
probably
was trying to get a date.
Well, that may be very possible, because that, I don't, being a character woman, I don't have very much, or a woman, I don't have much trouble with that sort of thing. Not at that age, anyway. But,
someone told me that you had taught school at
yes,
one time.
I taught kindergarten, nursery school for 6 years before I went into the theater.
Well, what I was going to ask you is, now, you probably knew Judy Garland, when making the picture, and I know you have a boy. Was Miss Judy Garland very pressured at that time? Now, would you have allowed your child to go through that?
Well, I wouldn't, if I could help it. I would not allow my child to go into the theater at all until, after college. That's my idea. Or at least, if they were terribly burned up with it, not until, and then I would feel that they must go through college and study specialize in theater, or have it their major effort in college, which you can do now a great many times, but I think a degree is almost adamant these days. I think it's very hard to get any kind of a job without one. And I'm a firm believer in no children, I guess, in the theater, which would be very difficult for all of us, I'm sure, in many ways, but I just think it takes away so much of the childhood. I don't know. You see, I didn't really know. Judy was the one I was with most of the time on the picture, and she was, I don't think she really was a star at that time, as she is, heaven knows now, but she certainly was on her way, and she was a very busy little girl when she wasn't on the picture, and most of my scenes and all were with Judy. I had very little actually to do with the others, and we knew each other, and I'm years older, and it wasn't exactly what you'd call a close relationship, but I was with her, and we talked every once in a while, as one does on the set. And all I know is that she was absolutely darling person and completely amenable and cooperative and everything else. I mean, I think that any difficulty that people may have felt about her a little later on in her perhaps behavior on set or her own difficulties were basically, I would think, health problem. She was then, I think, pressured terribly. As I remember, she was in one picture after another, and then she was having, her own personal problems. I think she married pretty young, and I would gather a much older man, and then I think that went on the rocks, and all the time she was working quite steadily, and there certainly was. I didn't know if there was pressure when she was in the Wizard of Oz. I certainly didn't know, but she seemed completely happy and like a normal, carefree, happy 16-year-old who was doing what she loved to do.
That was the Wizard of Oz. I think one of the few what I would call perfect pictures. It just, it's a beautiful film to see after all of these years.
I think it is too.
Did it gel right from the beginning when you were making it? Did you have the sense?
Well, you don't know because you don't see the rushes. And I really wouldn't be able to tell you. Just do your work, and in each scene whether it was satisfactory to you or you wish you'd done it a little differently or something. But everybody said it must have been fun. It must have been fun. Well, it was fun, but it was very hard work. You were in the chair at 7 o'clock in the morning and didn't get out until 9 in the makeup. All of us were. And then you went on the set, and it was always fun, I think, doing what you love to do, no matter what it is. But it isn't the sort of thing I would just say, well, it was a perfect circus to make, or anything like that. It was hard work and interesting, and I don't think we knew. I didn't know really whether it was going to be, I had no idea it was going to be anything like this, and I don't think most of us thought so. I think the studio, as I remember, thought it would probably last 10 years simply because they took out a scene, the jitterbug, they had a whole sequence of my sending the jitterbugs to the forest to bite them, you see, and make them dance until they dropped dead. And that was to sort of soften the others so the monkeys could get in there and get Dorothy, I guess. And they took it out, and because it was an exciting and really a wonderful. I suppose I did now and then see snatches of parts of it, but anyway, either I saw that or the filming itself. I don't remember ever going really to Russia's, but they did take this out because they wanted not to have it dated in any way. And they thought the jitterbug would date it, that was definitely the jitterbug dance that would go out.
How did you get from teaching school in Cleveland, Ohio to Broadway and
Hollywood? Well,
I
got, I don't really know, I know how. I always wanted to teach kindergarten as long as I could remember. And then I was in the senior play. I went to a girls' school in Cleveland called Hathaway Brown School. And at the senior, play, we took the men's parts because there weren't any boys around. And I played an older man, older much than my father, and I just loved it. And that's really when I got really badly bitten to the stage. And I was sat on promptly by the family. And so I didn't, in those days you didn't say, I am going to do it and you can, do what you please. You did as you were told. That's the way we were brought up. And so I sort of bided my time, and I really dismissed it. Then the family said, no, I said, if you want to fool around after a while, but you must first, do this other, and proceed as you always have wanted to do, which was probably a very sensible, answer. So I did, as I was told, and I was never regretted it. I just adored teaching kindergarten. But then I must have kept it in my mind a good deal, because when I went back, I went to Wheelock Kindergarten Training School in Boston, which is now a college, but it was just a kindergarten training school, then just 2 years, and I went back to teach in the public schools in Cleveland. And the first thing I did when I got home, without my realizing it, I tried out for a play at the Playhouse, which was a very small little theater on Cedar Avenue in those days in Cleveland. And I was accepted for, heaven help us, a part of an Englishwoman who smoked cigars and pipes, and joined the gentlemen after dinner instead of going for coffee and port with the ladies or whatever they had in the drawing room. And it was a rather bizarre type, and I'm sure my English was absolutely unbelievable. It was pure Ohio, But anyway, I just loved it, and I did it. And then, of course, I was teaching morning and afternoon in public schools, and I really couldn't rehearse the proper hours, and it was too difficult for them to work around me. This didn't matter because it was a very small part anyway. So then I didn't do anything more about it. And after a year or so, I had a private preschool, nursery school of my own in Cleveland. And then I thought I was going to be married, and then I changed my mind, and then I went to Rye Country Day School to teach. This is outside of New York, of course, and I began going to the theater a great deal and got again badly bitten. And then when I went the next year, my mother had died, and I went home to be with Dad for a while, and so that year I had a nursery school again on the lakeshore in Cleveland for little children who it was difficult for them to get in, mostly friends, children, my sister's friends and so forth. And then I started working at the Playhouse in the afternoons because it was this morning, and I just loved it so. And then they invited me to come into full-time. It was not a question of full-time or otherwise. It was just sort of what you call an active member. They wouldn't take any more students, I think, than they had 4. And nowadays they have something like, used to have about, 50 or something, but now they have many more. But I guess it was probably also a matter of scholarship type of thing. Well, I didn't need that because I was being home anyway, living at home. And so I started working there, and then the next year I just gave up the kindergarten business entirely and concentrated on the stage.
You said that people, when they hear your name or see you, they immediately think of the Wicked Witch of the West. I have a friend who's in the hospital right now, as a matter of fact, but when I called him last night, I said, I'm going to tape Margaret Hamilton tomorrow morning. And he said, Margaret Hamilton. He said, do you know what she was marvelous in? Another language.
Oh, well, that's so nice.
Many people don't remember that.
That's a lovely, lovely compliment, because that was 1932, I think, Another Language.
Fine play.
Well, it was the first play I was in New York. And,
was it?
Yes. I'm sure there are always these moments for all of us, and I always feel, but for the grace of that, I might still be, tapping around I still am tapping around, but I might have not opened any doors, because it was that, you see, that was the first picture I made, too. And it was Helen Hayes and Robert Montgomery played the leads in the picture, and Dorothy Stickney and Glenn Andrews on the stage, but it was a part, I've never had a part like it since, and I expect I probably never will. I would rather be remembered for that than anything I know of, because it had, at least I tried to give it a restraint and subtlety and lots of things that one likes to think could be connected with one's work.
Well, he'd seen all of your pictures, you know, but that's the first thing he thought of.
Well, that was a wonderful part, just wonderful, and it was a wonderful play. I often wonder why it hasn't been revived more, except I'm sure that the climate, you know, nowadays of the theater would tab that as extremely old-fashioned and out of... But it isn't.
Yeah, I think it led the way
it's,
for a number of other plays.
Yes, I know. It was really
Rose Franklin. Now, why doesn't she write more?
Well, you know, she did quite a little bit afterwards, quite a lot of writing, and I think she's written a couple of books in the last, I guess, 5 years. But she also, I don't keep closely in touch with Rose. I talk to her once in a while and see her in a rare time. I always think we'll see each other more, but New York being what it is, one does not. And I think that she had not been awfully well in the last, now I guess 5 years off and on. She's been in and out of the hospital. She wrote apparently a very terribly funny book about her experience in the hospital now, and I'm ashamed to say I can't remember the name of it. It was a delightful name and a very funny book. And then she wrote about her own experiences as a playwright and the people she worked with now.
I like to work very much.
She did, you know, turn out a lot of the Claudia things for a long time. But I always feel with Rose that she's, you know, not, heaven knows, a one-time writer, but she's not somebody that just, you know, tosses it off and then goes on to the next sheet. Her plays always, to me, have been with a great deal of insight and depth to them, more perhaps than some others. Perhaps that's why she doesn't. I wish she would, but I think there comes a time when you feel, perhaps as a writer, I don't know, but that you know, have said what you wanted to say. Perhaps I don't really know.
In front of you is a picture from the scene from the My Little Chickadee.
Adored that man. So.
One of my favorite pictures.
He was
how
the
was
most
that
wonderful
fun to make?
person. Oh, that was really the most fun. I think I laughed more in that picture than I ever laughed in my life before or since, just all the time. Mr. Fields was really the dearest person. I just adored him. I always expected he'd be a sort of a diamond in the rough, you know. And he was just a diamond.
I thought a little cross myself, really.
He was.
I thought he might be a little, you know, grumpy.
No, he was just wonderful. And you know, I often think of him, and I never get over the surprise of it, because to me he was one of the finest gentlemen, and I say that in every meaning of the word, that I ever worked with. He never, on the set, within the hearing of ladies, not that this is so violently important at all, but he never said anything that one, you know, shouldn't hear. He never used obscene language, which a lot sometimes people do. You know, they get carried away with something. And he was always such a gentleman, and at least when I just loved him, and fun. And, of course, you know, everybody knew he, as he used to say, drank his lunch. And he would, around later on in the afternoon, would not always be something that they could keep and what I want to say, develop. But he was terribly funny. He was never, you know, I never knew anything about him that was not very much of a gentleman. And even when he would go off on these sort of arms of conversation, let's say he'd start something, you see, and then he'd go off, or he'd finish the scene, and then he'd go on with it. And he was always hilariously funny. And I had a perfectly, my very first experience with him in the train was terribly funny, because we had finished the scene, and you know, I expected them to say cut, and they didn't, and it went on and on. All of a sudden I felt his arm around me and started hugging me up, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And he said, "You live around here, little girl?" And I looked out the window, and I thought, no, they didn't give me these lines at all. And I, didn't want to look at the camera, of course, or anybody else, and I started glancing at him, and then I glanced out the window, and I thought, well, what am I going to say? And I thought, this is the limit. They didn't give me these lines. And I said, no. And he said, you live with your mother and father? And I said, no. And he said, oh, well. And, of course, I didn't know what was going on, you see, all this time. This was all ad-lib on his part. And this went on and on and on, and it biting my lip. And I, of course, went to see it the next day. He wanted me to see it, and it was just terribly funny because I was, when I finished the scene, it was cut was written all over my face. I was finished, and I was looking out at the cowboys and the Indians outside, and all of a sudden, and then he's doing all kinds of little faces, winkings at the camera, and sizing me up and everything. And then around me goes the arm, and then this complete amazement on my face as I feel this hug up, and I think, and then saying, "Do you live around here, little girl?" And I thought, why? I was so mad because I thought, now this is awful. They didn't give me these lines at all. I don't know the answer. I don't know what to say. You see, it was very funny.
It's funny, the first person I ever interviewed in my life, which was about 12 years ago, I guess, in California, was Richard Cromwell.
Oh, yes.
One of the first questions I asked him was, what was W.C. Fields like? Because he was in Poppy with him. And he said, I had never met Mr. Fields. And I said, well, you were in Poppy with him. And he said, yes, it's true. He said, we were. But he was ill, and everybody was told not to bother him at any time on the set because it was very difficult for him to finish the film. And he said, I was never even introduced to him. So I rather questioned that. Just 2 days ago, I went to the New Yorker Theater to see Poppy, which I'd never seen, just to see, and they did not have a scene together.
For goodness sakes, that couldn't happen.
Yeah.
That's one of the funniest things about pictures, because you can be in a picture and your best friend can be in it. And I remember Sarah Hayden was we were in a picture called Way Down East together. No, it wasn't Way Down East, it was another one. I didn't know she was in it. She didn't know I was in it. And she called, we never met, never the twain shall meet, so I can't remember now the name of the picture. So she called me one day and said, do you want to go and see a picture that I'm in? And I said, yes, I'd love to. And we were going in the afternoon, and she said, I said, what is it? And she said, and I thought, oh, I'm in that too. And so I thought, well, I won't tell her anything about it. And so we went, you see, and before Sarah came on, I came on, and she said, well, for heaven's sake, you didn't tell me you were in this. And I said, yes, I know. But here we were going, it was such fun because she had no idea that I was in it. And I had not known that she was in it, you see, until she told me. I didn't know she was in it. It was great fun. But that happens, you can be in a picture and you don't. And often, I was in, for instance, a picture with Jean Harlow's last picture, and that wonderful Clark Gable, and I had a little tiny scene with Mr. Gable and
Saratoga.
Saratoga. And I never saw Miss. I saw Miss Harlow on the set and met her to say how do you do to, but that was the sum and substance of that. And people say, what was she like? And well, you don't know what she's like at all.
So back again to my little chickadee. Now you loved him. What about her?
Oh, I loved her too. She was just great. She had, as I remember, pretty much the say of the casting, and I was so flattered and pleased that she wanted me, because that was given, everybody, I guess, was given to understand that she pretty much decided whom she wanted to have in the picture. I don't think, he probably didn't care, but you just try and get anything away from him anyway, so I'm sure it didn't make any difference to him who was in it. But she's about up to my shoulder, and she was also a complete lady. She did not smoke, chew, drink, or anything else on the set, and I just loved her. She was all business and fun, and lovely twinkle and sort of sense of humor. And he would, as I think all great comedians do, if it's funny once, it's funny 6 times, you see, and they enjoy doing these things. And so there's a time when you have to have a director or someone that knows, now this is enough of this, or decide, you see, to cut it out. But he would be enjoying something. He'd go on and on with it, and she'd say, no, that's enough. No more of that. And he'd say, well, we'll just try once more. No, that's enough. I don't want any more. And there'd be these little, sort of controversies. And one day, Eddie Klein, who directed, who was such a wonderful person and was I guess, old vaudevillian from way back, and the most fun. And he had a habit of taking off his hat and doing one of those sort of off to Buffalo steps after every completed, shot. And he said to me one day, he said, I'm not directing this picture, I'm refereeing it. But there was really there may have been between them. Nobody knew. No one knew there was any real dissension between the two. But there were these little moments. And Mr. Fields was apt to sort of go on and on and just to enjoy everything thoroughly. And she enjoyed it too, but she had a very definite and I think correct sense of this is, when to stop and when not to stop. And I think so often I found with the few really great comedians I've had the privilege of working with, they don't know when to stop. They just enjoy it so much, and everybody else is enjoying it, so they go on.
Mr. Fields' son was at the Gallery of Modern Art about a year ago.
Oh, really?
And he brought with him his grandson.
Oh.
Amazingly enough, they look very much like
really?
the senior. And someone asked him, of course, about My Little Chickadee, because it's a classic film.
Oh, it's
Still
wonderful.
so funny. And he said, well, oddly enough, if you watch that film, there are very few scenes in it where they're together.
Yeah.
And it's for this reason. They didn't gel that well as personalities.
Well, you see, I think, as I understood it, I may be wrong, but I thought they wrote it together. And it turned out, as someone explained to me at the studio later on, that it was a sort of a series of very funny incidences that they both sort of thought up. But and it was, as I understand, the thing that connected was to be my character. Well, my character wasn't strong enough, and it wasn't, it was sort of in and out, and she was just crazy about him. I think she sort of was looking around for a man anyways, I remember.
One of the decent women of the town, as I recall.
Yes, but I thought he was absolutely charming person. Of course, I must say that was not exactly what I call restrained, or not a last piece of work of mine. But that, I think, that the storyline perhaps wasn't, as they said, wasn't strong. Because I think that I thought the storyline didn't matter with those two people in it, because I think that scene with Miss West, and I'll never forget it, in that schoolroom. Oh, I think it's absolutely divine. And of course, and his one, with the, is that where he works up with the goat in bed with him?
Yes.
Yeah. Was there a manhole cover in that? I can't remember. Either he told this, or
no, that would be the wrong period for a manhole cover.
Well, it was in some other either picture. I can't remember, but I think seemed to me he probably told it to us, because the story was that he said he woke up in the morning and he felt that he had a manhole cover on his head, and imagine my surprise when I reached up and there was a manhole cover on my head. He probably was something he told us, but
he's so remarkable, because I see many of his old films. I see all of them when they're shown again, usually at the New Yorker, and very often if you go on a matinee, it's full of children. With
really?
Mostly people about my age who have children, and they brought them. But the children laugh.
Oh, I know it. His... I think, again, with the really great, there are some. There are probably, I don't know how many, I would say perhaps 10, maybe not that many, really great, great comedians. And, of course, their timing and their subtlety and to me, it's the most absolute beautiful piece of artistic work. It's just like a jewel to me to see people like that work. And the little nuances, his timing and his subtleties and his looks and everything were just so superb.
Those asides he does, and you have to listen very
pantomime
carefully.
Was so
many
wonderful.
of his films I want to see over and over again because you miss. And then the laughter is so loud, you'll miss it too. There'll just be 1 and 2 word lines.
Well, you audience, because you look at people, and everybody, of course, was always watching him when he was on, and then it was a great place to bring visitors. Apparently, I don't think he seemed to care very much, and I don't know if Miss West did or not, but there would always be one of those top people in the studio would bring people in, and they'd stand on the sidelines. And you looked around, you looked at the electricians and everybody, the various people that really the only audience you have usually in a picture, and all the other actors, and everybody's standing around there with this big grin on their faces, just waiting for something, And then, of course, there'd be these doublings up, no sound, of course, because you naturally didn't laugh out loud, but people would just really double up, with laughter over something he'd done, Oh, to me, he's just tops. I adored the person, and he was so kind and so really did so many lovely little thoughtful things for me and for all of us. I just loved him. I always resent any. Once in a while I read an article about, Mr. Fields was this or so-and-so and so-and-so, but to me, he was a real gentleman, a really, really gentleman, and an absolute darling. I just loved him.
Well, you couldn't say about anyone I admire more. So
oh, it's nice.
That's very good.
Glad to hear you.
Very good to hear. We're going to see you again soon.
I don't know. I hope so. I just got a little notice from Jack Mapes, the producer of Rosie, which I have a very small part with, and Rosin Russell's new picture, and they're going to preview it, I think, in California. He's inviting everybody, and I'd like to be able to just fly out and see it and fly back. But I really don't know how I would, because it's I don't have that big a part at all. But it was fun to do, and that's and then apparently something I was in. I did 2 years ago, I think it was. About a year and a half ago, was Who's Afraid of Mother Goose, and that's apparently coming out in October. But that was a television special. It was supposed to go promptly on at Easter, and is now, about to be shown, I guess. But I don't know of anything that's coming up. That's at once the damnable part of this business and the exciting part of it. You never know when the telephone is going to ring. It may not ring for months, but on the other hand, it may ring tomorrow. And
maybe ringing right now.
Very exciting.
I brought you out on such a nice day. I should say double thanks to to Margaret Hamilton.
They'll always come again,
Because I went to see her the other day and took a tape recorder to a beautiful apartment she has in Gramercy Place, and the tape recorder didn't work, and she was nice enough to come back.
A nice visit, anyway.
On a very thank you. Yes, it was on a very busy day. So we've been talking today with Margaret Hamilton, the Wicked Witch of the West, and you see, she's really very nice. Thanks very much. And this is Richard Lamparski